All right. Time to film. Let's see what we got here. What's cool enough to do a video with? Let's try the gun room. All right, anything interesting? I don't know, I'm not feeling it. We've already showed off a lot of this stuff. Let's try gun room number 2. Don't really come in here very much. Got a lot of our, little classics and whatnot. Got, our classics. This might be kind of cool. A little bit of a, model 1887, little Terminator 2 action. Always got our trusty noob tube.
I mean, we could do the 50.
Really? You think so? I don't know. The comment section seems to just not really like it whenever we talk about AK-50 stuff, Yeah, we'll give it a shot. What is up, you sexy YouTube mother lovers? Yep, that's right, it's time to talk about the AK-50 again. I know we haven't done an update in a few months. There's a couple reasons for that. One, we don't spend all our time working on the 50, just kind of whenever we've got some free time or whenever we feel particularly inspired. But two is that I just don't want to do updates all the time and really tell you nothing or tell you menial updates. So I wait until we've got enough that's changed on it to actually talk about. And now, as you can see, I think it's finally time we do another update, tell you what exactly is going on with our almost finished design of the AK-50 V3. So let's get into exactly what the hell this is. Like this, not this. That's a grenade launcher. Let me just put that back away real quick. Back in its home. Okay. What is this? So for the benefit of those of us who have joined us, in the last few months and don't exactly know what an AK-50 is, because we have actually gained a couple 100,000 subscribers since the last time we did an update. So the AK-50 is a project, kind of a rolling project that we've had, for years now, where we've been attempting to build an AK platform 50 cal, 50 BMG, which sounds hard, and I guarantee you, it's harder. That's what she said. Now, a lot of people hear 50 cal and they think, well, I've seen ARs at my local gun store chambered in 50 cal, 50 Beowulf. Why don't you guys just do that instead? Well, for one, 50 Beowulf is stinky and I don't like it. For two, we already did that. And it was super easy, which is number 3. This was literally designed to feed out of an AR-15 magazine. It was made to feed an intermediate cartridge rifles, semi-automatic rifles. So this is not even in the same league as 50 BMG. These are very, very different cartridges. Brandon Herrera subscribers. People who pee sitting down. Which one do you want to be? Don't be this guy. Subscribe. Now you might be saying, Brandon, this doesn't really look like an AK. Where's the wood? Where's this? Well, it's not going to look 100% aesthetically like an AK because you're sizing it up. However, well, first of all, square cube law exists. Google it. So it's not going to be able to be a 1-to-1 scaled up AK. That just doesn't, that's not how physics work. And for two, while we're scaling it up, the person is going to stay the same size. So length of pull, which is the distance from your shoulder to, for example, where the trigger is, that is going to stay the same size no matter how big the gun gets, or what caliber for that matter. So we had to get creative with some of the stuff, and we had a lot of unique problems to this gun that we had to solve, and I think we've done an interesting job at tackling them, while still keeping it as AK as we can, because at the end of the day, this operating system is 100% AK. Got a gas-operated rotating bolt operating system with a long stroke gas piston. I mean, hell, even the fire control group is still 100% AK. You can use an unmodified AK fire control group in this gun, and it takes AK pistol grips. You can't really ask for much more than that. We also did a lot of things on here that kind of take inspiration from a lot of AKs, and other Soviet weapons, a lot of which also designed by Mikhail Kalashnikov, such as the PKM. So now the last AK-50 update we did, you might remember we had a couple of these parts that we had 3D printed and had kind of mocked up for you guys. We probably went back to the drawing board on every single one of those since then, just on, little tweaks and changes and things we wanted to modify. But this right here is, of course, almost entirely 3D printed. There's a couple of real parts like the pistol grip and everything, but for the most part, this is entirely 3D printed as a mock-up, so we can see how the gun is going to actually function when all put together, just to make sure that our files are right and everything, and work together the way that we want them to before we go and have it actually made, which gets very expensive and takes a very long fucking time. Now, even just what you see in front of you, this 3D print right here, hundreds of man hours, possibly thousands of man hours, have gone into getting the V3 where you see it in front of you. So R&D on stuff like this is very much not cheap, which is where we'd normally do a sponsored spot right about now. However, I think it's fitting because it's an AK-50 video. This video sponsor is by me. Figured we just pimp out the merch, the classic Let's Go Brandon AK-50 V2 shirt. This is available over at Bunker Branding over at my store there, so I'm gonna leave the links down in the description and the pinned comment if you guys wanna pick it up. I promise you, all of the proceeds will either go directly into the AK-50 R&D or they will go into alcohol and loose women. I can keep that promise. But this is all a pretty much functional 3D printed mock-up. You can see the bolts even rotating, like, sorry for the sound of the scraping plastic, but this gun is actually functional and I'll show you the guts. We'll get into that. The first aesthetic thing you might notice here is our stock. Now we've gone back and forth on a lot of revisions of the stock, different ideas that we had. Now, nothing we were really 100% happy with, but I like the way that this is now turned out. So here you've got, this is gonna be our rubber butt pad here, and this is our support for shooting prone. Let me do this here. Knock over all my fucking ammo. But this is a nice little support for the shooter to be able to grab onto. A lot of 50 cals and weapons like this have that as well. And we took inspiration from the PKM style stock. So it's got that kind of very PKM Soviet contour going on. I really like that. Another thing we have here is the bulged front trunnion, which is a feature that a lot of the other AKs have, like the RPKs, the PSLs. Anytime you've got a beefier front end, like if you're gonna do an RPK or heavier caliber, a lot of the AKs opt for that bulged front trunnion, which looks just really cool on the receiver. We've also got, of course, the sexy AK magwell dimple here. Does it absolutely need one? Does it need that for integrity? Probably not, but you have to admit, it does look hot. This is of course without the rivets because we are using a stamped receiver on this variant of the AK-50. Hence the bulged front trunnion and everything. This is all gonna be stamped sheet metal. Now we tested that on the AK-50 V2 and it actually worked shockingly well. A lot of problems still with that gun, but really none of them stemmed from the receiver. So just another way that was a very, very informative, successful test, I think. Now moving up to the front here, we've got our handguard, which I think looks pretty damn aesthetic. We've got a couple things that we've altered on this since, but this is good enough for government work right now. Got our gas block here, direct inspiration from the AK, and we have a modified JMac style brake. JMac, of course, JMac Customs makes some of my favorite brakes for the AK, some of the best performing ones in my opinion, and they're homies. We like them. So it only made sense, keeping true to the AK aesthetic while also being very functional, that we would include a JMac. Now, one of the biggest challenges with the AK-50 has always been, what are we gonna do with dust cover and stock and all that? And how are we gonna handle optic mounting on a platform that retains zero? This is a huge gap to span on something that you want to hold zero. So we think we figured out at least one solution to that, and we're gonna test this and see if it actually works in the real one. So without further ado, let's get into disassembly. So as you can see here, got a little ring retainer at the bottom. So we're gonna go ahead and pull that out, rotate that to the side, and our dust cover should come off. There we are. That is our dust cover. And if you're wondering what all this is, that's just how we're fusing the prints together. Obviously these are huge prints and our printers only have so much bed space that you can use to actually print parts in. Maximum dimensions, that whole thing. So what we're having to do is print these in pieces and then put them together outside of the printer. Put that over here, and here we have our not safe for work topless AK-50. So here we have a lot of new things going on. For one, we are missing in this version, we're missing the buffer that will also be in this gun. We just don't have it in the model right now. Here you see our system that retains the dust cover from this side. We've got two tracks here. One back here in the rear trunnion, one here in the front, that actually taper, that gets progressively tighter as it goes along. There's gonna be a lot of that's what she said in this video, just FYI. But the idea there is it's just progressive and it allows it to tighten itself up as it locks into position. So easy to align, but also still holding zero pretty well. Now our bolt carrier has undergone a lot of cosmetic upgrades as well as some functional ones. But one that you'll notice here is that this is very strange. It has a pin through it where it's hinged instead of threaded. Now, if you compare this to the AK-50 V2 piston, we have of course, our piston threaded in with this just kind of acting as a locking nut, which is kind of funny because this is just a muzzle nut from a typical AKM. We kind of thought that would be a fun Easter egg. But it's threaded into the bolt carrier and is pinned with a rivet right there, just like a traditional AKM would be. Also, as you can tell, this has gotten, this is pretty crude and, you know, little, you know, fallout looking compared to what we're hoping this is gonna turn out like. But hey, what can you say? It fucking worked. So we got some swoopy cuts here that we kind of cloned from the Yugo M76. Just some sexiness here that, you know, cosmetically I think helps the gun a good bit. But the reason why this is here, this hinge, is the original one, the original V2. You probably remember we had a bit of an issue pulling it out of the gun at certain points because when you have this back and aligned with the holes cut in the receiver rails to be able to disassemble the gun, because it's so long, the piston is still somewhat retained by the gas tube. Problem. So in the original AK-50, the V2, we were having to try to rotate it out and it was super tight. It just really wasn't, it was not very effective, right? So what we decided to do on this one is hinge it so it can very easily be removed while still being plenty sturdy. And if you're thinking that that is a genius design solution, you're correct because we got it from an actual genius, Mikhail Kalashnikov. So in the PKM, he did the same thing because he encountered a similar problem. Weird, it's like you run into new problems as you size up calibers of your designs. But the PKM really had a lot in common with the AK. It's a big upside down AK that is belt fed. For people who don't know, Mikhail Kalashnikov also, again, very heavily involved in the design of PKM to the point where PKM, the K stands for Kalashnikov, just like an AKM, where it's just PK modernized. But yep, he's also got his own hinged piston here. And we just thought that was a really neat design idea, and that's what we incorporated into this gun. So here, something we were really fighting with was, again, lug contact. Things started getting better toward the end. We were able to kind of figure this out a little bit. But we still want more lug contact in this track here. And this track, of course, the rotating bolt part of the AK is, again, completely borrowed from the AK and, again, the PKM a little bit. Now, as you can see from the 3D print here, we have significantly beefed up the lug by a lot. This is a beefy lug now. And the contact area here inside of this track, this cam groove here on the bolt carrier is significantly greater. So we're hoping that that's going to help us with a lot of our potential smearing issues and such. But another thing that you might notice, if you push it back directly flat, it doesn't rotate. Now this is not the way the V2 functioned. The V2 would rotate because there was no flat spot in the cam groove, and that was intentional. This is because of one of the bigger changes that we've made between the V2 and the V3, which is why we think it's gonna work a lot better, one of the many reasons. We've actually incorporated helical lockup, which the original AK did as well. This was something that, in moving to the tri-lug, we kind of abandoned, but we're coming back around to it again because we think it's gonna work better and because it's just more AK. So if you look here, these lugs are not flat. So they are on the V2, and it's kind of always been that way. Now on the V3, if you notice, these are helical. So basically, as the bolt is coming through the receiver here and into the front trunnion, it is threading itself in, kind of like a screw. It is rotating. Once it hits here, we're incorporating a system, basically, not to get too complicated right off the bat, but much like the Saigas have, for example. Let me just find you one. So here we have a 410 Saiga to kind of demonstrate my point here. That is a bump rivet or bump pin, or whatever you'd like to call it. So open this bad boy up. If you see this little guard here that helps close the gap in the dust cover on this 410 shotgun, and you see the little cutout up here to accommodate that upgrade, you could start drawing some conclusions about what we're doing with V3, but we'll save that for another day. But basically, if you look through on the inside of this trunnion, and sorry, it does look a little weird with the barrel here because it is a shotgun. They're a little funky, but it's that little rivet right there that's poking out. That is what that is. And basically that just creates a spot that cams the bolt. It starts the rotation of the bolt. The rest of the rotation of the bolt's done by the cam groove, but that is just something to just kind of hit the bolt a little bit at the front that begins the rotation. So we're hoping all of that is going to help us with just feeding, function, just the entire guts of the gun is really just the bolt carrier, the bolt, and the front trunnion. That's where your lockup occurs. That is where you're gonna have the most problems typically, and I really hope that this is what kind of irons out pretty much everything. We've also beefed up the front trunnion significantly as well. As you can see here, that's a pretty hefty little feed path there that we're hoping works a lot better. Nice little tapers in everywhere. You engineer folks are gonna love that. It's also beefed up with the bulge here, which is just gonna allow more meat on the threads there for the barrel threading in, just a lot more support. 50 BMG is a big fucking round. You don't want it to do things it's not supposed to do. Some other YouTubers that we know have experienced that firsthand, and it is not fun. Now, before we talk about the handguard, because that is kind of neat, we've got our barrel here. One of the most obvious things you'll see about it is that it is fluted up front. Doing this for a few reasons. One, for weight savings. The more weight you save on the front of the gun, the easier it is to actually hold if you wanted to be a psychopath and shoulder fire this thing standing, which of course I'm going to do. So we do it for weight reduction, for heat mitigation, because this actually does help quite a lot to have this fluting here, and 3, because it looks dope as fuck. Now for the handguard, one of the things that we came up with that I'm super proud of because I think it's super neat is our retainer system here. So this handguard is obviously, it's pretty hefty, and it's not gonna work quite like an AK is going to. That's just the fucking nature of the beast. However, we were able to sneak a little AK Easter egg in there. So our handguard retainer works just like an AK handguard retainer lever, but upside down. So what retains the lower handguard on the AK is this little bit here, aptly called the lower handguard retainer. Very, very inventive. So there's a lever on it here that if you swivel up, allows this to come out. Now, of course, you can't swivel it up when it's got a gas tube on it. There's a little ferrule there that prevents that from coming up and out so your handguard doesn't fall out or anything. But yeah, you just basically move that lever up, remove your gas tube, and you are able to swivel that up and then move this out and forward. And then it comes back and it locks into place. So on the 50 here for the entire handguard, we have one that swivels out the opposite direction. And then you just kind of wiggle that here, trying to be gentle with this because it's a 3D print. And then you pull this out. This one's not gonna be retained, it's just gonna pull all the way out on this model. You can pull your handguard out. Here's your gas tube, by the way. Probably should have pulled that out first, but hey, whatever. Gonna unthread our brake real quick so we can actually get this handguard off. Yes, we did actually go back and recut these threads from the 3D printer so we could actually thread this on. We are a little extra. Take your handguard up, slides right off the front, and we have our handguard. So this is most likely going to be made out of milled aluminum. As you can see here, we have our barrel with more flutes because, like I said, weight savings, heat dissipation, and sexy. Also have our gas tube, pretty minimalist, nothing super crazy. It's gonna be a tight fit around this thicker portion of the barrel. We also have 2 pegs here that are going to be fitting directly into the front trunnion there to stop it from rotating side to side, or at least wanting to. And it helps it snug it up there. But I like the look of it, and I like the contours and the way that it meets the front trunnion. It kind of takes those body lines forward, like, like this gun was actually meant to be together. I like continuity, I like that design shit, it's kind of neat. So then we take our handguard retainer lever again, go through here, and back up, and we are again locked on. So now reassembling the gun, take our bolt, put it back in our carrier, bend the weenie, back in the track, and she's back together. Put our muzzle brake back on. Our nicely threaded, you 3D printer guys are gonna love this shit. smooth printed threads. Let's see Paul Allen's threads. Now we are ready to put our top cover, slide that back on. Of course, this goes back forward, and voila, you still have your completed AK-50-ish. Now, another problem you might have remembered from V2 is magazines. So it was kind of janky from the start. Our only way of retaining the magazine up front by the front tab, because we didn't really know where the front tab needed to sit for the mag elevation to be able to feed properly. We weren't 100% sure on that. So we used an Allen screw to kind of tension it to where it needed to sit. And once we found out where that was, it was still kind of funky because your front tab's locking on a fucking Allen screw. So now that we know the height that we need to get to that, we also have a mag well here to kind of help feed in and kind of give it that easy rock and lock that you would come to expect. Of course, we've got our optic rail, our Picatinny rail up top, which is why we're so anal retentive about, I guess, well, being retentive on the dust cover. Will this hold zero? I really fucking hope so, but we'll find out. So what's left? Well, designing the V3 as it sits is like pretty much entirely finished. Now it's time to start making shit, which we've already started a little bit on. Like, we've sent out some of the stampings to a friend of ours to try to get that made. So like our dust cover and our receiver, stuff like that. Already got a barrel blank on the way, so we're gonna be turning that in the mill and working on that part. Since in the shop all we have is our manual mill, we have a lot of limitations, so just like in the past, we're gonna have to get a lot of the stuff sent out, outsourced, and made. Which is where I get to ask a favor. We're talking to machine shops right now, we're getting quotes, and we're running into issues with people just not wanting to do one-off prototype work, which I completely understand. Specifically, parts like our front trunnion here are driving us crazy trying to get a shop that's willing to be able to do that. Speaking machinist real quick, the locking lugs in the front trunnion are gonna require a little bit of plunge EDM, and then, of course, the machining to the actual part itself. We're getting ghosted by a lot of shops, and I figured it was time for me to ask the AKG notification squad if you guys work at a machine shop, or you run a machine shop, or ideally if you own a machine shop, and you'd be willing to help out with some of this stuff. I've got an email, I'll put it on the screen and in the description. Please don't say like, oh, I know a machine shop down the road, or my buddy's got a little, hobbyist CNC. Please, we're trying to keep this to like actual like serious machine shops that would be willing to work on this stuff. But if you guys work in that field and you'd be willing to tackle this, please shoot us an email. We don't want anything for free. We just want to be able to make the AK-50 as quickly and as accurately as possible. Now, there's a ton of other cool design features and really just neat little stuff that we put in the AK-50 that I'd love to talk about. I didn't even talk about the safety selector. There's just a bunch of stuff here that I think is really cool. But if I went into all that shit, honestly, this would be a 30 fucking minute video. You guys have been wondering where the progress is, and I think it's finally time that we can show you what it is that we've been working on. We'll mount an actual scope on the real one. I am super excited to finally make this gun a reality in a way that I'm proud of, and not a way that looks like a janky garage prototype, even though I will remind you again for the 80th time that did work. I'm really excited to bring this gun to life, and I'm really excited that I got to show pretty much every step of the way to you guys. I think that's kind of neat. We're in this together. So anyhow, on that positive note, thank you guys for watching to the end of the video. And as always, I'll see you next time. Bye. Pew!
Fuel is my obsession to make the perfect weapon, like Rasputin's rise to the top.
Now the first, no, fuck. So we've got some swoopy cuts here that we've kind of fuck. I've already got a, fuck. You guys are wondering, oh, that is a terrible noise.